Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming out on this Friday morning. It's a very important topic, so thanks all for your attendance. So I have the pleasure this morning of welcoming our group of panelists for this discussion on cybersecurity and fraud. Michael Manning is the resident agent in charge at Homeland Security Investigations in New Haven. Matt Lidestri is Assistant Vice President, Information Security at COCC. Chrissy Caplet is Vice President, Operations and Security Manager at Groton Bank. And Detective Richard Savino is Digital Forensic Examiner for the town of Groton. Can you hear me all okay? Is this coming through? Okay, great, just wanted to check. So I'll just kind of set the stage a little bit with some of the sort of statistics and background on why this is a very important topic and why we continue to kind of promulgate a lot of information as Groton Bank on why, how to protect yourself, and particularly businesses. The scams are just coming fast and furious, and so to the extent that we can be all better informed about what's going on, what's kind of the latest on the ground in terms of these different scams, the better prepared and the better to avoid these. So according to the World Economic Forum, cybercrime is the biggest fraud threat facing most businesses today. So that sort of gives you exactly how important this is. It is estimated that cyber crimes will cost $10.5 trillion annually worldwide by 2025. The average cyber attack cost of a small business ranges from $120,000 to $1.24 million, and 71.1 million people fall victim to cyber crimes yearly. The top 5 cyber crimes are extortion, identity theft, personal data breach, non-payment, and phishing attacks. And just to kind of give you some, a little bit more localized data, Connecticut had 99,937,935 in total victim losses in 2022, according to the FBI Internet Crime Report. So obviously big numbers, that's why we're here this morning. So I'm gonna, enough with me, I'm gonna turn it over to our panelists. If they could each just introduce themselves briefly and give a little bit of information about their role. So
Hi, I'm Mike Manning. I am with Homeland Security Investigations. Unlike the FBI, we don't have a TV show. So you probably have never heard of us, but we are the second largest criminal investigative agency of the federal government, right behind the FBI. On any given day, we seize more drugs than DEA, we seize more guns than ATF, and we arrest more child predators than the FBI. We investigate anything that goes in or out of the country, and now my agency has decided to get into cyber crimes because that is the wave of the future for criminals. And I have 11 agents that work for me, and there are another 9 agents that work in Hartford, so we have 20 federal agents that cover the entire state. We are much smaller than the FBI, who is our partner in these cyber crimes because they also have more resources than we do, but we also do the major kind of investigations as far as that goes. And half of our cases are actually child exploitation, which also involves cyber crimes, but we're not going to talk about that today because you're lying.
Good morning. I'm Matt Lidestri. I work at COCC, which is a core processor. I'm our information security officer. And essentially what COCC is, when I say core processor, is it's a service provider for banks and credit unions. So we provide banking services, we provide other types of services that help the banks and credit unions run. My particular area is cybersecurity. So I oversee a security operations center, which looks for threats targeting financial services and tries to stop them. Between our SOC and our cyber defense teams, and obviously very involved in all the corporate services that we provide to the banks as well. So we have a very unique vantage point because we're very focused on financials specifically and understand the threats that are targeting them.
Good morning, I'm Chrissy Caplet. I oversee our deposit operations and security department at the bank. My 2 teams actually work very closely with all the check monitoring that comes through the bank. There's a bit that we do with wire transfers as well, but that's my main focus is security and deposit operations.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Rich Savino, detective at Groton Town Police Department. For you from out of town, we're local PD. We're about a medium size for the state of Connecticut. We're your first line in everything for the most part when it comes to reporting, whether there be an active incident. We've all seen that in the news recently. My first primary role is to be a detective. I investigate everything from burglaries to cyber crimes to child predators, you name it, there's all kinds of stuff. About 5 years ago, I was sent to a training through the U.S. Secret Service to be trained in digital forensics. So I've been down to the National Computer Forensics Institute 4 times now for specialized training in things related to why we're here today.
Thank you. And I'll let you hold the mic.
Sure.
So the first question, which I'll address to everyone, what types of schemes are you seeing that are perpetrated directly to small businesses and organizations?
So small businesses, it's a lot. It's not necessarily targeted at small businesses, a lot of these things. I'll mention a couple things that I think may not be mentioned, you may not have heard of. So small businesses have their drive to keep their business open, operating smooth and all these things. So I've seen a scam where somebody was contacted and said, hey, you haven't paid your electric bill in 5 months. You're up to $5,000 in electric bills, you need payment immediately or we're shutting you down. Well, this was a restaurant. They said, we cannot possibly operate without power. And they're gonna shut me down at 12 o'clock if I don't pay this bill. So what they do is they give instructions on some crazy payment method, and these guys wanted gift cards. So he went down to a local store, he bought $500 in gift cards, and he read the numbers over the phone to this person who's threatening to shut their power off. Now what these scammers do is they create an urgent situation. They create a situation that makes you panic, and you kind of skip over that reasonable thought process, right, that we all have. But when you're in panic, you don't realize that this is a scam sometimes. So now this business is out $500. There was never a threat in their power being shut off. They could have just went online and said, oh, let's call these guys today and see if they fall for it. Now those scammers are $500 richer. This business, who was never in any danger at all, is now out $500. And sometimes this doesn't even get reported because, how am I gonna look? And okay, it's only $500, it's not like my life savings. So that's a quickie for a small business. And I don't know if we're gonna get into it later, but there's some more individual, the everyday person getting targeted. But the reason I think a small business would be vulnerable is because they don't have these offices full of people that are overlooking these decisions. It's often maybe a family-owned thing, and they take that panic and they act themselves, and now they're out some money. So just for a quick example, I've got a million more, but we'll start with that one and then I'll pass it on.
Thank you.
We've actually seen the same thing. We had a customer that it was $2,500, the same exact scenario, and that's what they do. They catch them at a bad time. But a couple of the other things, I just made some notes. We've seen wire transfer scams where the business email address has been compromised, the instructions have been changed. We ask a lot of questions. And it's certainly not to be nosy. It's really just to try to get in the middle and just understand where it is that we're sending. We've had some customers that have sent out the wire, and the wire does not go to the intended place, and then the business is out the money. Counterfeit checks, altered checks, that's just like an everyday thing that we see. And another one, endorsement fraud. So businesses are mailing their checks out. Sometimes it's through the blue postal bins, that you see. Thieves are stealing the mail out of those postal bins and either altering the checks or they're just forging an endorsement on the back, depositing it at a bank through some electronic means, whether it's at the ATM or mobile deposit. Nobody's actually looking at the check, and the check goes through. The business doesn't find out about it until they get the late notice. So then, by the time they get the late notice, like the money's already been spent. So then we have to work with the other bank to actually get that money back. And there's really no time frame for when the depositing bank has to send it back. We had a customer last year, it took 18 months to actually get all of his money back. There was like 10 checks we were trying to collect on, over $60,000. So that can be crippling to a business if they have to repay, they have to issue another check while we're waiting to get that money back, so.
So I'll say I agree with everything said so far. Business email compromise is a fascinating one, and probably the one that we see impacts small businesses the most. And I'll give you a little insight on how that works. So what happens is, let's say you work with, for toxic, a lawyer, right? And you work with a lawyer regularly, interact with them. They happen to have their accounts get compromised. One account, they clicked on a phishing attack, they thought they were logging on Microsoft 365 and they weren't. Attacker gets the credentials, can log in as them now. What they'll do then is look across the contacts. They'll actually take some time and figure out what goes on in that account. They'll figure out you're a customer. Then they'll say, hey, you know, I know we just had this transaction. Could you wire the money to this account as well? We're having a change. And of course, your accounting team's gonna go, oh, okay, we need to change this and pay them properly. And it's coming from their email address. It looks like them. It often sounds like them because the adversary will look and see how they communicate, how they word things, so they can at least target it toward, target in a way that's gonna be very believable. So it's very hard to decipher those sometimes when you're getting those requests to move money to a different place that wouldn't normally be asked. This is very prevalent during COVID, because during that time period, a lot of people were switching from very physical ways of paying to trying to pay via ACH or something like that, or wire. So that was digital. So certainly we saw a spike during COVID when this was occurring, but it's still common. Any type of, to this point, social engineering is just the easiest way to do that, to conduct those types of attacks. Best way to be vigilant to those is just be mindful, and you see requests to do things that you wouldn't normally see. You pick up the phone, if you know the third party you're working with, call them and just say, hey, I got this, I just wanna make sure, is this legitimate? They'll verify it fairly quickly, and we've seen some where they did call and they found out, yeah, no, it wasn't legitimate. Those are sometimes less urgent, sometimes they're more urgent because, you know, their CEO's on a plane flying to somewhere, needs the money changed immediately, or, you know, there's often an element of urgency, but when you have a more convincing story, it's a little easier. And adversaries also have the advantage of using AI now to help them, because it can actually AI is great, it can write all sorts of things for you, but it can for attackers as well. So they can make very convincing emails, notes, if they have language barriers because they're, say, you know, maybe they're foreignly located and don't speak English as a primary language. Services like ChatGPT can fix that. They can actually write it out so that it comes across as better English. So there are some things we were able to take advantage of before we could. The other thing I'll say is malware. Malware is a thought for a small business, just making sure your machines are clean. They don't have, malware on the machine obviously can scrape credentials. So if you're logging into online banking, using a password, malware can look for that and then report that back to someone. So that's another way we see that attack happen.
So for those of you who are not computer experts, which I am not, but I can talk to you in layperson terms, because if I can understand it, I'm sure you can understand. Imagine the internet is like an iceberg. And if you go on to your normal server, Chrome or Internet Explorer, you get to see the top part of the internet. But underneath that is the dark web. And that's where the organized criminal hackers are congregating. And in those dark web forums, we're seeing a number of different things. First, I know it's a pain. You turn on your computer and it's like, Windows needs to update. I gotta wait 5 minutes for it to update. The reason that they put out these updates on your phones and on your computers is because there's a vulnerability that they've identified. And if you don't update your software with the latest updates, you become susceptible to whatever program or malware or whatever they can to exploit and get into your system. And so on the dark web, there are literally forums where they explain to the other hackers, hey, this is why they did the patch, and this is how you can exploit the folks who have not done that patch. And then they'll go into businesses and they'll just try over and over again, okay, to see if you've updated your software or not. And if you haven't, they use the problem with that software that you could have avoided by updating your software by then getting into your system. And once they're in your system, that's when they decide what they're going to do. Sometimes they'll try to exploit you directly. Other times they'll go onto the dark web and they'll sell the exploitation to other criminal organizations to then either shut down your system or to demand money, threatening to shut down your system. Once they have identified that problem, you're in a world of hurt, because they can shut down your business, especially if you rely on computers for your business.
Thank you very much. I was just gonna add something, if I may. The whole callback concept, that it's important also to kind of contact the person if they've sent you an email with an attachment or wiring instructions or something like that with a number that you know is for them, because I think a lot of times there'll be a number in the electronic signature, and if your inclination is just to call that number because you think, okay, well, I'll just call the number listed here, it could be a scammer. I had this happen, fortunately, in a positive sense. It was an email that I thought, this is weird, why am I getting this? And you know, you see the signature and you think, okay, I'm just gonna call that number, and instead I took a breath and called the correct number for them and was able to verify that it was the correct email, so I just wanted to add that. I guess in terms of, we've obviously seen such a spike in cyber crime over the last few years since the pandemic. Is there anything, I think the last time we did this, there was a spree of ransomware attacks as an example. Is there something now that you find is kind of trending, or something that's really, you know, kind of coming up more and more often in sort of the cyber crime fraud type of environment? Anything you want to point out in particular?
So it doesn't matter what type of business, that's what we've been seeing across the board. We've had hacks into police departments, we've had hacks into hospitals and government municipalities, as well as car dealerships and aerospace technology. So it's not limited to just large businesses or anything. It's easier for the hackers to go after the small businesses because there's not as much money that they can exploit out of you, but it's a lot for you. And there's less likely of a chance of the feds getting involved and tracing them back to where they are, because when we decide where we're going with an investigation, it's based on the dollar value of the money lost. Because again, I have limited resources. I have one agent who actually knows how to do the cybersecurity hacking thing. Everybody else works all the other cases. So it's limited resources, and they take advantage of that. Plus, you know, luckily you do have somebody here in Groton, but if you're in a small town where they have one detective who handles everything, the odds of him knowing what to do on a cyber attack is greatly reduced.
I'll say during the pandemic, there was a spike certainly in ransomware attacks, and they haven't gone away, they're not going away. But, you know, some of the things, if you think globally, the value of cryptocurrency has dropped tremendously. That actually has an influence on how adversaries behave, because they collect their money via cryptocurrency. So they actually take the financial hit when that drop occurs. What we've seen over the last year and a half is more of a move towards social engineering. Social engineering is simple, it is not terribly glamorous, but it works well, and it, frankly, for the attackers, this is a way of them, this is their job. This is what they do, is organized crime. So this is the way they pay their bills. So they've shifted their focus more towards social engineering in recent years. Is the trend that we've seen, because it works and because it can be easily enabled. Certainly we still do see other attacks as well, but I say the emphasis has shifted a little bit.
What is social engineering again?
Social engineering is any type of attack that tries to convince an end user to take an action. So you get an email that has a link that says, hey, you know, log into M365, your account's about to be deactivated. You click on it, you go, okay, I'll log in and reactivate my account. And it ends up going to something that looks like Microsoft 365 or your email, and it really isn't. It's really a clone of it that then is collecting your credentials. Attackers can set up those phishing attacks, those phishing emails, and do that. Business email compromise is another one, where someone else's business account gets compromised and they ask you to do something as a customer or partner. you're the victim in that case, or that customer is that person whose account got compromised, just depending on who's paying, where the money's going. Anywhere you can be socially engineered, the example given earlier about, hey, we're gonna turn off your power if you don't pay tonight, so you need to pay and go to, the local store, buy some Amazon gift cards and then read them over the phone to us. Again, social engineering, they're asking you to do something, to give them money, or do something to give them credentials so they can carry out further attack or gain financial benefit. I'll play anyone else if you want to elaborate on that, but I think that's a pretty good definition.
Quick about social engineering and a quick story. So there's so much information on the internet about you, about the things you do, and on top of that, we have data breaches where people are getting even more personal information about you. So say you've got a bank account at a bank, and they look up the website and they say, okay, the manager, Bob. Hey, this is Bob from Bank, and we're doing an investigation, and there's somebody here that's stealing money from our customers' accounts. Your money's not safe here. We need you to move it until we get it straightened out. Okay, well, what do? Well, don't come to the, just for an example, don't come to the Groton branch because we're under construction. I'm actually at the Mystic branch. Wow, how do you know that? Well, it's on the internet, guys. But people think they can trust somebody because they know a small bit of information and the rest of it's all made up. But that little detail about, hey, we're under construction, believe it or not, is enough to convince the person on the other end that there's a problem and I need to move my money and I need to trust this person that just called me out of nowhere from an unknown number and told me that there was this guy who anybody would know who he is just by going on the website. So this person then withdrew their money. They walked down to a gas station and they fed the bills one by one into a Bitcoin ATM. Now a Bitcoin ATM is basically a box on the wall that you feed your money into and you scan a little QR code that's a square looking code with little things in the corners, and that's a Bitcoin address. So when you put the money in the machine, it converts your money into a cryptocurrency. Then you can send it to the recipient. Once your money goes in that machine, you don't own it, the machine doesn't own it. We can't just rip that thing off the wall and get your money back. The company of that exchange of the Bitcoin ATMs now owns that money. We can't take it because it's not yours anymore, and it's not the suspects. Your money now exists on a little tiny code that shows up on your phone screen. Your chances of getting that back are slim to none, and that's just me being honest about this. We can trace cryptocurrency, it is public, it's a public ledger basically. You can see where the money goes and you can see where it disappears. And because of the way it's divvied up and changes wallets around the entire world, there's ways to clean the money, to put it in a wallet and it spits out and now you can't trace it. The cryptocurrency investigations are extremely complicated. There's software that assists you in doing that, but it's extremely expensive and it's a highly trained field. I've probably a little more than a basic understanding of cryptocurrency. However, I would call a federal agency. I'd reach out to Connecticut State Police for some help. I've seen millions of dollars go away, and we didn't get it back. And I reached out to everybody I could, and we didn't get it back. And that is huge. Your life savings. You think about somebody who's smart enough to save up millions of dollars in their life, but didn't want to take 5 or 10 minutes to verify some information, and they lost their life savings. Now I've seen this in $500, thousands of dollars, $30,000, millions of dollars for one person. So I guess the bottom line here, and the big trend you're going to hear over and over today, is verify the information you're getting on the phone. You've heard it already. Go on the website and call. Well, this guy called me, says he's from this bank. Well, let me go on the bank's actual website and call them, and let's talk to Bob. Hey Bob, I got a call from a guy that said he's you. What's up with that? Well, it's a good thing you called me because that sounds like a scam. Okay, very good. I'm gonna keep my $30,000 and go on with my life. That's a tough one. And it's very hard for us as a local PD and to tell people we're not gonna be able to get your money back. And most of these cases get closed out after a lot of chasing money around. We have to write search warrants for everything now. You know how long it takes to get a search warrant written and signed? much longer than it takes to move money about 5,000 times, right? I'm not writing 5,000 search bars, we can't. But eventually you may get to the end. And eventually, if you're lucky enough, a federal agency could freeze a crypto wallet where your money is, if you're lucky enough to get there. And then guess what? There's 1,000 other victims' money in that wallet. So then if you're very, very lucky, and this is a very, very rare occurrence, that money gets seized and you may get a few bucks back, I guess. But that's just the reality of it. So when it comes to cryptocurrency, you have to assume it's a scam, unless you're doing your own investment, which Coinbase or other actually more governed crypto wallets, it is an investment opportunity. Judge that for yourself. But it is a legit thing, but it's extremely common in scams. So anything involving cryptocurrency, you have to heighten your awareness for what the situation is. And again, take 5 or 10 minutes to verify everything. If somebody calls you, hang up. If you want to listen to them for a few minutes because you're convinced, fine. But take the 5 or 10 minutes after to verify that your grandson isn't in jail and needs bail money immediately, that your bank isn't scamming you, or there's so many different silly things that people have sent money away for. And it's pretty sad, but definitely the theme you're going to see here is take the time to verify.
I wish I could say that, like, a lot of that didn't happen at Chelsea Groton, but it's just, it all does. Like, the amount of stuff that gets reported to security, and we monitor everything, you know, anything that happens to our customers, whether it's a consumer or a business, it gets funneled up to my area. We've seen well over $1 million so far of exposure to fraud, and again, that's been what's been brought up to us. But to go back to the question since 2020, I'll just dial it down a little bit to just check fraud. So I've been with the bank for 23 years. Most of my career has been in retail banking. I've been in security for since 21. And the check fraud that we're seeing is just, I think it's, you know, it's just getting worse. Whether it's altered checks, checks that are stolen, counterfeit checks that are made, and like I said, the endorsement fraud, it's just, there's so much even with the paper checks. And again, I oversaw, you know, a lot of branches. I was a regional manager when I was in retail, so I would see a lot of that funneled up, but I just see it so much more happening now. And you think it's pretty simple, it's checks, you know, but the amount of fraud that we're seeing on them is just crazy.
So I guess a next question, and you kind of touched upon this in terms of verify and in terms of updating, you know, your different systems in order to be up to date. But what else can businesses and organizations do to really, you know, help their security and prevent these types of losses?
I'll start. You know, from the bank's perspective, you know, my first thing is online banking. Like, I think it's a great tool to be able to use. You can set up entitlements for your users. Go in, you check your accounts, you verify your checks as well. But positive pay is a feature that we offer that allows basically us to know the checks and the ACHs that are clearing your accounts, and we match it up to what's actually coming through. The onus can't just be on the bank to look. Like, we do a lot of review, which I think we'll get to that question soon. There's a lot of steps that we take, but it's also like we need our customers to do that as well. You know, help us take a look at those checks.
I would say from an internal perspective, one of the best things, there's a lot of answers to this, but I would start with vulnerability management. It's one of the big things. Like I said earlier, you know, adversaries are looking for those vulnerabilities, and if you have those vulnerabilities to break in, and it's basic, I actually call hygiene, because it's simple things that we do on a regular basis. We'll apply a patch all day long because, you know, if something's not performing right, well, is it being done because there's a security fix? Because that's really just another problem that just needs to be corrected. It's just not affecting you until someone takes advantage of it. So, you know, I like to think akin to my house, right? If I have a house and someone can probe, look at my house and see if there's anything off, right? Is there a window that's left open? That would be a vulnerability, so we'll try to climb through it. Is there a vulnerability that doesn't lock quite right? And if someone walks around and tries to jiggle it, does it pop up suddenly and they can get in? That's a vulnerability. I should probably fix that lock, right? Same thing for networks. If you can repair those vulnerabilities in advance and be proactive, not just Windows, not just your servers and workstations, but also we've seen more attacks against appliances, firewalls, VPN appliances, like how you remote into your network. That's becoming more common, more prevalent. CSA has a great website, cisa.org or gov, and they show you all the major vulnerabilities that are coming out, and they'll flag ones of criticality, but there's a lot of what are called zero-day attacks that are being taken advantage of by adversaries. Nobody even knows about it. There's no patch. They're out in the wild. Bad people are already using them to get into environments, and there's no way to really protect yourself right away, which means those vendors are now scrambling at releasing patches quickly. Adversaries will take advantage of it. So make sure you're staying on top of your patches. Make sure that in your environment, you have good endpoint security, you have good security throughout. You have folks you can work with that understand cybersecurity in some way. You're not all gonna have people that are cybersecurity experts, but you can always work with a third party who does. So I would strongly consider that in cases where you don't have someone, where you can say, hey, I got this weird email, would you mind just giving this a second look and tell me if this is off? Or, hey, I got this alert on my workstation, I'd really like to understand what it was all about. And have them verify it and say, yeah, you know, that is a concern, or oh, it was because of this reason we looked. That can be really powerful and to your advantage where you can utilize it. Because ultimately, you're working with your online banking accounts, you're accessing those from your internal network often, making sure that you have secure access to them on devices and on the network you're working on can really protect you. The other is good security around your accounts, making sure strong passwords, you change them regularly. Some of the, again, basic hygiene, it goes a long way.
Are cell phone apps as safe as through computer?
Okay, the question was, are cell phone apps as safe as computer? Yeah, generally speaking, I'll say yes, depending on where you got the apps. So, this is a little bit of a question I want to be careful about, but when you download an app, make sure you're getting it right from the right vendor. Because there are fake apps that exist out there, just like fake sites, like phishing sites, where they'll use those to collect your credentials. So if you have an Apple iPhone, the App Store is highly vetted. It's a very safe environment, and Apple tries to make it that way. Google Play Store is still a very reliable store. They have improved their checks over time. I would say that's also a great way to do it. And the security of the apps is probably no different than the security of your computer. There are idiosyncrasies between both, but by and large, it's fine. There are third-party app stores where you can get apps for Android devices specifically. You should use those with extreme caution, just depending on where you're downloading the app and who's vetting it, because there are fraudulent apps out there.
Is app source is the only criteria, or the environment in which you operate, like Wi-Fi security? Because the laptops, we have all kinds of cyber security interruptions like firewall and then all those things. But in the case of cell phone, we don't have such thing. Except, of course, what you say is, I agree with you that app source is reliable. But once we get to a reliable app store, are they safe enough when we operate on let's say any environment like Wi-Fi or something like public Wi-Fi, for example?
Okay, I'll summarize that quickly, but yes.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. That was good context. So the question is it regardless of the OS or the app that you're using, if you're on Wi-Fi or some other device, does that change the security? It depends, but largely a lot of the apps are using SSL security now, or TLS security, so it's encrypted back and forth, and it's verified. So there is stronger security around that. When you're in your corporate network, it's highly controlled, so obviously that's the safest place. But if you're on Wi-Fi and make sure you're using encrypted connections, make sure the app is highly trusted. And for banking apps now, they're all required to do TLS SSL, so any banking app you're going to be safe. But if you're ever in question, if you're in a place where you don't feel like it's safe or you're questioning it, I generally just wait, and that's my recommendation to people. Wait till you get to a place where you're more comfortable. But generally speaking, because of the encryption that's used today, it's certainly stronger. There are ways of trying to break into those connections using, hijacking your Wi-Fi connection, trying to route it through. You're gonna get warnings often on those apps. If you ever get a weird warning or something unexpected, close it out, wait till you get somewhere else. But I would say, just because of the way the culture has evolved, we're always mobile, we're always doing things on our phones. They work to make that extremely secure just because of the nature of how we want to interact and the technology that's available today. Go ahead.
You mentioned a website, government website. where you can look to see, what was the name of that?
CISA.gov,
CISA?
CISA.gov,
Okay.
that's right. I was trying to remember CISA or US CISA, but CISA. It's excellent, they post all sorts of information, they have guidelines on best practices, but there may be other resources too, that's just. The question was, what was the site I recommended earlier? It's CISA.gov.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else I want to add to that.
What was it?
Security controls that a business or organization can put in place to better protect themselves.
Two-factor identification, so that way, if you're gonna log in, you still have to give the code that you're logging in, that the company sends you via text or email. That's a good way to protect yourself. Also, for small businesses, when your employees leave, please take away their credentials so that they don't have access to your network anymore. That's another vulnerability that you could easily remedy by correcting.
And also, change signers on your accounts. We have a lot of times where, a business or organization doesn't realize that they haven't removed a signer if they've left the organization, and they're like, oh, they're still a signer, and it was they left 2 years ago. So, keeping track of that type of, who has access to online banking, who has access to sign on an account. I guess, were you gonna add something? I was just gonna ask, as a sort of follow-up question when it comes to employees, that's a great point. What would you say are some good practices in terms of training for employees to make sure that they're aware of everything that's going on and how they can help keep your organization safe? And is there a frequency of training? Are there certain resources from a training perspective that you recommend? You can certainly pass it if you want.
Right. So, just based on the cases I see, and I always think, well, this could have been prevented if. So, let's go back to that guy who walked in the bank and needed $30,000 because he believed there was some stuff going on within the bank and his money wasn't safe. When you're taking out $30,000, what does the bank teller ask you? Sometimes nothing, sometimes, oh, what's this for? Well, the guy said, I'm buying a car. Okay, here you go. See you later. I just lost my $30,000. An idea would just be to, okay, what kind of car? Okay, now we need to look further into this because this person doesn't know what kind of car they're buying. But they were told to tell the bank teller that I'm buying a car. So training could include just more follow-up questions, but along with that comes the customer understanding that the bank needs to find a balance between customer satisfaction and holding them up from getting their own money and security. That's a huge balance that I think is a struggle right now. So it's gotta be done in a way that the customer doesn't feel like they're not getting what they want out of the bank. So I'd say in training, that balance has to be very carefully taught. And I think there could be a fine line where you're making customers angry and you're also giving them what they want. But there's gotta be the understanding that the evolution of all this, everything was fast, now we have the internet, this is great, and then we had all these vulnerabilities, and now we're slowing things down again because the security is now heightened and things need to take time to verify. And again, there's a lot to do with that balance between security and customer satisfaction. I think some training could definitely go into that.
You set me up perfectly. So we actually do a monthly training with our employees. We call it, it's a Zoom that we do every month, and call it Fraud Watch. And we literally communicate out the fraud that we're seeing. So that way if something's being seen in like the Norwich area, our branches in the Mystic or Niantic area will understand the fraud. But we talk a lot about those questions. We ask a lot of questions, and it's certainly not meant to be nosy, and I'll jump in on any conversation with a customer. It's not about us knowing like exactly how you're spending your money, but we're really trying to protect you. And if something's out of the ordinary for you, like if you're all of a sudden coming in to withdraw $30,000, wait a minute, like who needs to withdraw $30,000 in cash? Like usually there's something going on. But we do this training on the regular, trying to even get that gut instinct with our employees that something's amiss. the amount of time that we spend with customers asking questions, like, and that's like the theme of our fraud watch every month is like, kind of like, what kind of questions can we ask a customer, so that way we're helping protect them. But also from a training perspective, when it comes to cyber, we use a company called KnowBefore, and we get monthly training for our employees. It's all about phishing attempts, things to click, things not to click, what to do, and that's training monthly. And if our employee happens to fail a test, they get a little bit more training. So we're just constantly training on anything with fraud or cyber.
I'll second KnowBefore. That's an excellent resource, and they're not terribly expensive for businesses to take advantage of. There's others too. Proofpoint one's a solution. There's a handful out there, but utilizing some of those platforms can be really helpful in training internally. Just some of those common use cases for attacks. Social engineering, again, is the common methodology, so you can raise people to the thought process around suspicious emails, but also, what about someone just following you into the building and tailgating you? So I walk in the building, I swipe, I walk in, someone else just sneaks in behind and doesn't, walks in, beep, and walks in. You could talk about physical security, you could talk about email, you could talk about account access, all sorts of different topics, and they have them all built out for you, so that can be really powerful, hitting those topics on a regular basis. I think people often wonder, what's the frequency? Monthly is a fantastic rate. Monthly to quarterly, I think, is great depending on what you're trying to do. And then also focusing on, if you have some specific departments that are more prone to certain types of fraud, cater some training for them. So if someone in your organization handles, say, the accounting aspect of it, and they might receive requests to move wires somewhere else, you might want to put them all through additional training specific to wire fraud. We did that with our accounting team. We did that with a number of our teams that handle very specific types of fraud. One of the big things is they'll pretend to be the CEO. So anyone who interacts with the CEO asking for urgent things, we put them through special training on that type of attack, just so that they have an even greater heightened awareness, because they're at greater risk because they're more exposed to it.
Pass.
So Matt, actually, I have a question that's certainly anybody can answer, but it's sort of specific to you. Can you talk about what kind of online banking measures a business should put in place in order to reduce risk?
Yeah, I think, one of the biggest things is to be aware of what's happening in your online banking account, right? Because that is your avenue for money to come in and leave and manage on a regular basis. So first of all, like I said, make sure your account passwords are strong, make sure your users' account passwords are strong, rotate them periodically. I would suggest at least annually, more often is better, of course. Use long passwords. What I mean by a long password, not 8 characters if you can control it. What I love recommending is, if you have the appetite for it, either use a random password that's generated, if you have a password safe or something like that, to do that, and you can easily centralize it, or use a passphrase. Passphrase is just a handful of words together that mean something to you but nobody else. So it can be, I don't know, John, Chelsea, Cup, October. But no one's gonna guess that because it's so long, it's hard to break into, it's something you'll remember. That can be extremely effective as well. Now, since the length of the password really matters, because adversaries will try to guess passwords sometimes, which we do watch for, and we actually do block those types of attacks when they try, because we can detect that for the online banking that we host. Many can, but it's still an attack type. Second, like the recommendation earlier, use 2-factor where it's available. Or know the risk-based authentication's in place. We use risk-based authentication, so we're looking for, by default, so we're always looking for risky behavior, and if something's risky, say someone logs in for out of country and that's unusual, for example, it's gonna step up that authentication and ask for additional verification. So where you can enable MFA, do so. That's very advantageous. And set up a learning your account, so if there's weird transactions, and by weird I mean not common for you, you get an alert. For example, send an email alert. If it's over $300 you're transferring out, you get an alert. You can go, oh, that's weird. Why did that happen? And pay attention to it. Don't send it to an account you don't monitor. Send it to someplace you're going to look at regularly, and set it to a threshold where you're not constantly going to be alerted, because then you're just going to ignore it. So having that visibility, watching it and watching just normal money flow, and making sure it makes sense and there's not something abnormal or unusual, really can help it can help go a long way into either preventing fraud or catching it before it perpetuates. Chrissy, if you want to add any more to that.
You got it all.
I was just gonna add, also don't share passwords, like online banking logins. We see a lot, at sort of the small business level where, we have a system where you can entitle other users, so they'll have their own credentials to get in and you give them specific access within online banking, what you want them to have. But we still see a lot of people where, oh yeah, I'm using, the boss's login and password, and oh, please don't do that. So yeah, no sharing password.
Just want to explain why your Google and your Apple passwords are the most important passwords I believe out there. When we use a browser, we all use autofill, right? I've been to the site 1,000 times. I type in my username, if that, you just click on the box, and your email or your username will fill in right with your password, and you click OK. Well, if somebody has access to your Google account, they're going to log into your Chrome browser or your Safari for Apple, and all your passwords are right there. You can literally go into the settings, go down to autofill or go down to passwords, and guess what? They're all right there, and you can read them in plain text. So not only did they sign into your browser because they had your Google or Apple password, but now they not only have access to view all your passwords, so all the websites that you click, yep, save my password, because we don't remember those things, right? Because we do complicated passwords like we just suggested. So if somebody has that, just make sure you're changing that every month or so and make it good. Like, my dog's name is Red, and you would just use maybe the initials, MDMIR, right? That's not even a word. Nobody's ever gonna guess that. Obviously, you lengthen it, throw some numbers, some underscores or dashes or asterisks, make your passwords complicated. But if you're gonna protect one password above all, make your Google or your Apple ID, because that will give anybody access. And it's very easy to enable multi-factor with Google and Apple, and it'll text you a code right to your phone. You can also go in your settings and see what devices are authorized and already logged in. So say you had, you logged in at work. You can go in those settings and see, Groton-155 is logged into my Google account. What's that? Oh, that's my computer at work. Well, what's this one? I don't know. And you can just one click, sign it out. So you can sign yourself out of anything that doesn't look familiar. You should only have, I don't know, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5, depending on what you do for work and what computers and whatever you trust. But if there's another phone on there that's not yours and it says there's an iPhone 12 signed into your Apple account, I don't have an iPhone 12, who's that? Click the button, disconnect it. You can unauthorize any device right from your iCloud or Google settings. So again, protect those passwords above all, because it gives access to just about everything.
Chrissy, I have
Is it true that the NIST compliance suggests to not change your password so frequent because it actually leads to forgetting your password? What's the frequency that the NIST compliance says for changing your password?
I think, and you're challenging my memory a little bit, I think it's 853. I thought it was 42 or 45 days, if I remember right, to change passwords. But I'll say the guidance is changing a bit over time. So they're leaning more toward recommending longer passwords, changing them less frequently, and using passphrases. So I think the historical recommendation of use challenging complex passwords, make them random, and then change them every X days is starting to shift more toward passphrases because mathematically it makes more sense. And also for the human mind it makes more sense because you can't remember those, and again we're relying now on password managers incredibly heavily. It's one password to rule them all. So I don't remember the exact, you have to look it up, but that's my recollection of it is shifting.
If I have a password, for example, can I use the same password for, let's say, 3 bank accounts or something like that? Is it
Please don't. The question was, if you have this, if you have 3 bank accounts, can I use the same password for all of them?
Same password, yeah.
Yeah, my request, please don't. Because here's what happens. Let's say, I'll use a different example. Let's say you have LinkedIn and you have Google, and you have Facebook, and you have a bank account that all have the same password. Sometimes third parties have breaches. There was an issue with LinkedIn a number of years ago, for example. Passwords got exposed in encrypted format, but they can be reverse engineered over time. It happens to other third parties too, just using an example. But when an adversary can figure out what the username and password you had was, and they know users often reuse credentials, they'll now try them against VPN logins, online banking portals. This is a tactic called credential stuffing. It's when you take credentials from one place and put them in others and just seeing what works. The success rate is extremely low, but all they have to do is get a small number that were right. They can get in those accounts and then obviously take any number of actions.
In other words, one more option is we have a set of 10 passwords, you could on cycling it.
Password manager.
Yeah, so have 10 passwords, cycle it, yeah, you could do something like that.
1, 2, 3, 4, 10.
They may figure that out though. If you have a number, they're gonna try to tweak it.
So that we can easily remember or something like that.
LastPass.
Yeah, password managers are probably the best tactic to that, or coming up with some similar algorithm that's going to be something you're gonna remember that others can't, but password managers are typically the best avenue for that.
Question? Yeah, that was my question, passwords, like a LastPass, is that a good idea? There's something scary about putting all your passwords into a password manager like LastPass, and then you can get everything, but.
They all have their risks.
Right.
Like anything else, there have been password managers that had breaches before and all their credentials or the number of credentials got exposed, possibly in encrypted format, but over time that can be reverse engineered potentially. It's hard, depending on the type of encryption used and a lot of other factors. That's a tough answer because everyone has to do what's kind of comfortable for them. A lot of password managers are safe. You can use local ones too. Not necessarily good for business, but so for business, if you want to have one that's just internal, you can have ones that are just on your network. Psychotic is one that actually does a password safe. Okta does that if you use Okta for two-factor. Their number, they'll actually give you a password safe functionality that are internalized or very focused to just you. So LastPass, a number of people use them. I think they were one that had an issue recently too though. So you can use for yourself if you want to have a local password. Password safe is one that you can install on your workstation and have if you don't need it distributed and accessed all the time. But that is a risk of any password safe you're kind of dealing with then. If it's cloud-based, can someone get access to that? So I welcome others if anyone has an opinion on that.
I have 3 interns here with me who are all seniors looking for jobs, and Cora here is a cybersecurity expert, major at Albert Magnus, and she was waving to me, so I think she has something to say.
Hello. About the passwords, LastPass actually just had a major hack not too long ago, so I would not recommend them. I got certified by Cyber Patriots from the Air Force to give like some general cybersecurity advice. We often advise the built-in password safe for Apple if that's what you use, because it will notify you if your password's been found in some sort of breach. And back to the passphrase thing, I think you might have said something about having one password and rotating it, or like having 10 and
For
flipping
example,
it.
serial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So once I finish after 1 month, I go from the password number 1 to password number 2. So that what it means is I know the 10 passwords, I can put an Excel sheet or something like that. So even if I forget some software, I can keep on trying and then get back. That's my logic.
I totally hear you. It's a lot to try and remember those long passwords.
Yeah.
Something that we also recommend is to obfuscate your passwords for your passphrase. So if I wanted my password to be something long, something with very characters, I could write a passphrase, I graduated high school in 2020. And then I'll pull out a lot of the letters. I'll change an A for an @ sign and an I for an exclamation point and obfuscate it. And if I want to use that base passphrase over and over again, say I have a Facebook account and an Instagram account, I graduated high school 2020, FB. I graduated high school 2020, INST. To vary them, so that's one way you could take a passphrase, something that's easy to remember, choose a statement that's personal but not too obvious, something that would be all over your social media. I have a professor that has one. He says, I love Nathan's hot dogs, and then he'll add different cues on the end to keep it different, but something that stays in your mind.
But when sometimes not automatically the password is generated, it's so random, it just doesn't fit into any of the
Exactly.
things.
So that's why we often recommend those passphrases. It's something personal to you, something that's in your mind, something you won't forget, and you can vary it.
So she mentioned her website. If everybody wants to write this one down, it's haveibeen.pwned.com. Have I been PWEN? Yeah. Anyway, it means have you been defeated, breached, whatever. Type in your email, and it will give you a list of all the breaches that are associated with places you've had accounts with that email. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, so if you're using an email address or an account, it'll link it to any place that's been exposed.
So it could be anything from like, your app you use to go running, or your app you use for this and that. And just go on those apps, change passwords, because you know that at some point there was a breach. You know that you've entered credentials into that website. It's not a bad idea to just spend a few minutes changing passwords. But that's a good place to start, is that website.
It's without P instead of O. Have I been?
PWNED? PWNED.
Yeah. If you Google it, it corrects it too, so that's a tough one.
Can you spell it one more time for everyone? Sorry.
Yeah, and if you Google it after, it'll correct any errors there, because it's a popular site, but it's haveibeenpwned.com.
So Chrissy, I have the next question for you. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a business and personal account in terms of if you've detected something that looks kind of funky on your account, how long you have to report that to the bank?
Yeah, business accounts only have 24 hours, so if there's like an ACH, an electronic withdrawal that's cleared, that was unauthorized, we only have 24 hours to return that, otherwise the onus is on the customer. Business, excuse me. For consumers, it's a different time frame, but that's one of the reasons why we push positive pay, we push online banking review, so that way that can be detected, and we can obviously help our business customers so much faster.
And then for everyone, and I guess this may be a little bit more specific to Detective Savino and Michael, what should a business do if they've detected a problem, if they've been compromised in some way? What's the procedure? I guess actually, Chrissy, do you want to start? I don't know. Okay.
Call him.
Wow. Okay, so that's good. All right, as I stated in my introduction, we're the first line of all things local, law enforcement related, so sure, what he said. So initial reports are not always needed. So I mean, I've had my credit cards used in China or Alabama or wherever it may have been, and it doesn't mean you need a police report. Ask your bank, do your reimbursement, fill out a form and all that stuff. You don't always need a police report. It's just gonna waste your time and hours. And again, if your card is used in China for a ski trip, or that probably doesn't make sense, for whatever. Anyway, that's just because they told me, are you in China right now? I said, no. Okay, well, a few $100 was charged, just fill out a form, you're good. And sometimes it is that easy, sometimes it's not, sometimes you do need to come get a police report. But always ask first, you don't want to go do one if you don't need it. In an identity theft case, you always want to get a police report, because now you're dealing with Social Security and all kinds of things and credit freezes. And now this could be a much bigger problem, so you do want that on file. Places you can also report IC3, the Internet Computer Crimes Center, it's a federal thing where at the very least it gets your information documented. So if they do end up linking things together, they have your information as a victim. It's a great place to get your stuff in. And again, that's at the very least. You do want to do an IC3 report anytime you're a victim of a cybercrime. It's a very easy site to navigate. There's all sorts of avenues and reports you can put in, but you want it in there for sure. The other one, you want to speak on Vincent at all? No. Oh, okay. So if it's a huge amount of money, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, yeah. So I would reach out to the feds if you had like some like $250,000 or more thing, and they say, okay, is it within 72 hours? You have this information, and there's like this thing they call a kill chain, and it's like 20 lines of information. You've got to have all of them. So there are other avenues, but again, the first place you want to start is at your local PD, so. But from there, we'll figure out where to take your information and try to get you fixed up if we can.
And after you've contacted him, then there's a few things that you're gonna wanna do. If you have not already researched who you could go to if you've been hacked and they have taken over your account, a cyber company that could help you with that, you need to do that, because when you come to me, I am not ethically allowed to tell you, oh, you should go to this guy or somewhere. So you're on your own. Being prepared is a good idea. There's also, some companies provide cyber insurance. If that's something that you're interested in, I don't get paid by the cyber insurance companies or anything, but that might be a way to go, depending, it all depends on how big your business is and how much you're on the internet, right?
I'll just add, obviously from the bank's perspective, sometimes the fraud is actually detected by us. So we've notified you, we absolutely, like I can speak from my standpoint, a lot of times we'll work with the police department, because there's a lot of other things that are happening. If it's a computer issue, obviously we recommend, we'll shut down your online banking until you get your computer looked at, because it's just not safe. We require you to change your passwords, your online banking user ID, because you never know. But then again, from our perspective, we're also helping with the transition, whether we're establishing positive pay to help with the check fraud that could potentially happen, or the ACHs that come through, or we're closing or reopening your accounts. We tend to take it a little bit more central. We try to help our customers through all of that. And like I said, we'll work with the local police departments at the amount of times that we've sent information over with your permission, so we can get that information over.
So what we have noticed at the federal level, when there is a breach of a larger company, when we go and ask them for the data regarding the breach so we can track it down, they are very hesitant to give the federal government access to all of their systems and computers. So we don't seem to have a lot of cooperation with a lot of private businesses that have been hacked. And we're not the bad guys. We're not going to be abusing your data that you give us. We're just trying to track down the bad guys.
I guess last question, just you've given so much valuable information and suggestions today. If you have one last piece of advice that you would give to everyone, what would it be?
Hire my 3 interns.
Focus, I would say, put some energy into hygiene. Make sure you're taking care of the simple things that on a day-to-day basis may not always get the attention it needs, but can really help you in minimizing your attack surface.
I would say this for both consumers and for businesses, but talk to your banker. That's exactly what we're here for. If something doesn't look right, just come in, talk to us. If you talk to somebody on the phone that says don't trust your banker, well, that should kind of like raise a red flag. Come in and talk to us, call us on the phone. You can get to any of us through customer care, even just starting there to talk to somebody.
And just to add to that, I think this was the topic of one of the recent trainings. If you get a call that looks like it's from the bank,
Yes.
they have the ability to create phone numbers that look like they're coming from a caller ID perspective. So just because it looks like the number for the bank, don't trust it, call the bank itself.
We will never ask you for your social security number, your debit card, or your full account number when we call you.
I'd love to give a nice short answer like these 3, but unfortunately there's a few things I definitely want to get out there for you guys. There's some major issues with obviously preventing these things, and the best thing that I found is to simply just have the awareness of the types of things that are going around. So I didn't want to leave here today without giving a couple more stories. I think examples are one of the most impactful ways for everyone to understand what some issues are. So we've all been on a computer and we've gotten a pop-up we didn't like, right? Well, sometimes that pop-up looks like an actual virus alert. Your full screen is taken up and it says something like, your computer has a virus, you're gonna lose everything. Now imagine being a college kid in the middle of a term paper, and this pops up, and you say, oh my Lord, I just worked on this for 4 hours. Or you're a business, you say, all my business information is on this computer, I can't lose that. So what do? You call the number, because again, what they do, they create a panic. You're in a panic, you call the number, you're talking to somebody across the world. They convince you that you need to pay them in order to fix your computer. Now they just make the pop-up go away, and now you're out money, they stole your credit card information, they're buying plane tickets, in Russia now, and you've got this whole mess. All you've got to do to prevent that, everybody knows what Control-Alt-Delete is on a Windows computer. And I mention Windows because some 90 or whatever % of computers out there are Windows, right? Fun fact, Macs are much less vulnerable to these attacks because they don't waste their time on Macs because it's a whole different file system and all this stuff. So it's easier just to go off to Windows. So I'm not saying you're safer on a Mac, I'm just saying there's a lot less out there to target you as a Mac user. But anyway, all you gotta do is hit Control-Alt-Delete, that little task manager, click that, and just close your browser. And everything that just happened is now gone, and you're back to normal. But Control-Delete will almost always get you there. So Control-Delete, task manager, and look at your browser that you're using. And sometimes you can be doing something innocent and you get these pop-ups. Sometimes you're trying to stream a free movie or a sporting event and it pops up. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You could have been playing Candy Crush, who knows? But you've got to know that that is not really a virus in almost all cases. And I've seen people lose a lot of money simply just trying to prevent something that was never actually happening. My computer never was under attack. And another bad case, they tell you that they need to access your computer. So they make the pop-up go away and they say, you have a virus, I need to remove it, but you need to download TeamViewer or any other RDP or a remote desktop protocol type program. You'll start seeing your mouse cursor move. Sometimes they do it in a way where you can't see the mouse cursor. They go into your browser without you even knowing it while you're sitting right there in front of your computer. They go into your online banking. They can change your password sometimes. They can transfer money out. I had seen a business, it looks like their online banking was accessed, and there was somebody on, not banking, their payroll system, and a fake employee was put on their payroll, and this company was paying an employee that didn't exist, right? And then when they noticed it, they called us obviously, and they said, hey, we've been paying this guy $2,000 for, he doesn't exist. How did that get there? Well, somebody clearly breached your system and did that. So there's a lot of ways people are accessing your information and getting into your computer unauthorized, whether it just be a simple login from a remote location, or they're accessing your computer because you downloaded TeamViewer or UltraViewer or some other remote desktop application. Don't ever download anything that somebody tells you to. If you get a pop-up, just understand it's probably just a pop-up and you can Control-Delete and just get rid of it. If that doesn't work, you're better off shutting your computer off than you are going into that dark place of.
I had a few occasions where the same pop-up screen comes that your computer has lagged and then call this number, and then immediately after that the whole computer freezes and no keyboard works. So what I have to do is I have to switch off brutally the laptop. It worked at least about 3-4 times. I don't know whether that's the best way.
Like I said, you're better off just turning the computer off if the Control-Delete thing doesn't work.
Because no
You've got to
keyboard
assume
works.
it's a scam. You have to. When somebody calls you, right, about your car warranty, I know we've all gotten that one. Would you get a car warranty from somebody that called you? Or would you go to a website or a trusted insurance company or whatever it may be and say, I'm interested in extending my car warranty? Telemarketing it's hardly a thing anymore. You've got to assume it's a scam. Another thing is if somebody, all right, you're selling something on Facebook Marketplace, right? You had a couch, right? Trying to sell it. Somebody calls you up or hits you up on the Facebook Messenger and says, I'm interested in your item. Okay, great. Can we meet up? I'll drop off the couch at your house. Oh yeah, hey, look, you know what? I'm a single female. I'm a little worried for my safety. Can I send you a verification code? Okay, this doesn't make any sense, but it happens. Yeah, sure. You get a verification code and it says it's from Google. I can only assume that means one thing. Somebody accessed my Google account, and because I have multi-factor authentication, my phone number gets a code. And if you don't provide that code when you log in, you don't get to log in. But guess what? If they're asking me for a code and I think it's for another reason, and I tell them the code, they log in. And now they have access to everything because I'm a Google user. And now they have all my passwords. They can probably get into anything I've ever been on because they're now on my Google account. So don't ever give a code to anybody except the actual app or website you're logging into, because you could assume that somebody has your password. So the first thing you need to do, okay, that verification code came from Google or from Amazon. I need to go on Google and Amazon and change my passwords right now. That code alone is a pretty good indicator that somebody had my password and tried to log in. So you just gotta think more. When somebody's contacting you, just pay attention to these things. Improper English could be a very good indicator that somebody's overseas or international in whatever way. And odd forms of payment. If somebody's asking for payment and they want it in Bitcoin, or they want it in gift cards or iTunes cards or a MoneyGram, all these things are very, very big red flags of a scam. No business, any business owners here ever ask for payment in Bitcoin? Or go to Walmart and send me a MoneyGram? Any business ever say, hey, I need $500 in iTunes cards to pay for your whatever fee? Doesn't happen. So anyway, as a police officer, the best thing I think there is for everybody is awareness. You hear these stories, it might happen to you, and you're gonna remember this. Hopefully at some point we're doing like a series of videos and do some demonstrations and whatnot so you can see what these things look like. Maybe on our Facebook page or something, but again, just being aware, and that's why I wanted to squeeze these stories in, and unfortunately I couldn't get you all out of here, give a nice short answer, because I wanted to give these examples. But you have to understand that there's countries in this world that have office buildings full of people, and it's sad. Their lives and their jobs, some places, they're slaves. They're stuck there all day, and their purpose is to scam you. So there are definitely countries, and there's some very sad stories about the slaves whose job it is all day, and they have quotas, and there's consequences if they don't meet quotas. So they're working like their life depends on it to earn money for their bosses, or it's sad, but it's out there. And it's just as sad that we're the victims of that financially. So you need to understand the world, that the way online stuff has evolved, and that hopefully gives you better awareness.
I have a question.
Sure.
I've been a small business owner for 37 years, and lately, a year and a half ago, I got into politics. I haven't been elected yet. How efficient do you think the laws are on the books, state of Connecticut or federal government, to help you help us? Because I'm not happy with the government. How efficient?
Let's see, my boss walked in, she's over there. And this is the kind of question I think I probably should answer.
Well,
I'm a year away from retirement.
And simply put,
because I tell you, I'm running for office because I am completely unhappy with the federal government and the state government. They're not representing us. That's why I'm running for office. If you can, I want you to risk your career. Enlighten us to see what needs to be changed, what needs to be implemented, so that you have the means, the tools, the finances to help us be safe in our homes, in our businesses, because...
Well, I did mention a lot of things happen internationally, right? So we
Right.
get to the end and we find out who's done these things. I can't go knocking a door in Russia, and neither can he with HSI. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, there's a lot of dead ends and a lot of places that we're stuck, and a lot of things that, there's countries that have no obligation to comply with the America's law enforcement, whether it be a court order, search warrant, subpoenas, all these things. It's not really a matter of what I think we should do, it's a matter of what we can do in a lot of cases, and we are stuck a lot. But again, I'd love to pass this mic to the other side of the table. And see if there's any more to add to this.
So as far as the federal government goes, criminals are always, aren't bound by jurisdictions, right? So it's harder for law enforcement to keep up with the changing criminal element because we have certain boundaries that we have to abide by, certain laws that we have to make sure we're in compliance with. I think our laws are fine. It's just a matter of resources, as I said before, right? There are 4 million residents of Connecticut, and I have 20 agents in the state, right? It's when I'm looking at where are my resources going to go and what kind of crimes they're going to go. A small business could be devastated by a $60,000 loss. However, I don't have time to investigate a crime that small, even though it could be devastating for that individual because I don't have the resources to put towards that. So, I don't know what, unless you're running for president or Congress, I don't think you're gonna be able to help me, but the state of Connecticut does have cyber crime centers, which need to be funded as best they can. And on another, not cybersecurity note, the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force is woefully underfunded. The state police do not have enough bodies to man that. So if you are going into local government, I would say that would be a good resource to direct because there are so many leads on child exploitation that we don't have time to get to. And unfortunately, every time we don't get to one of those, it could mean somebody's being victimized.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding like MFA and trusting devices. So our computers at where I work are networked, and I assume if somebody can hack my computer, they're everybody's computer in the system. A lot of my staff likes to save their passwords. They trust their devices. I always tell them it's not a good idea, and they still do it. So I don't know, I mean, obviously I have an IT company that monitors our system, but am I right that saving passwords is not the best idea, or trusting devices? I won't save any of my passwords. I don't trust any of my devices because I'm concerned, because I'm the one that logs into the bank account. I don't want anybody getting into our computer system and seeing what I'm doing. So, yes, no? Recommendations on that one, or?
I would say people struggle with passwords. Giving them an alternative, a safe way to do it, like an internal password manager is good so they're not saving it locally. I'm not a big fan of saving passwords locally, agreed. Certainly not for critical accounts. And yes, if someone were to get into one computer, theoretically, depending on if it's a vulnerability, same way, if you run a homogeneous environment where everything's set up the same way, those other computers would be susceptible to the same type of attack. I think the big question is how are they saving their passwords too? Is it an Excel file on their desktop? Is it a sticky under their keyboard?
Most of us, if not all of us, are using Google Chrome, and it automatically pops up when you go into a website and it says, do you want to save your password? And most of them do.
Yeah, and that's probably going to their personal accounts, not to a work account, so.
No, they're work accounts.
They're work accounts.
They are work accounts.
I'm not sure how Google Enterprise is set up and if that's any different than the personals. Personal, I would definitely be concerned with because obviously your credentials are not going out to a account that you don't control from a governance standpoint.
Yeah, and a lot of our websites don't actually, after a certain number of days or anything, say, hey, it's time to reset your password. So.
Yeah. So my personal suggestion there would be, and I welcome others to comment, but use an internal password manager you control as a company would be the best way to do that, or they remember their passwords and use something complex like a passphrase. I don't know if you like that name. You know a lot of it, so I like that.
Yeah, there's one concept in cybersecurity. They teach us a lot in school. It's called least privilege. In 2013, there was a major target hack. I don't know if you remember, it was like 40 million credit card numbers and information. And that was all caused because there was a lack of privilege control. So an HVAC company that Target used to control their fridge, they got hacked. And because there was no least privilege, they were able to escalate all the way up to take those passwords. So especially in situations where you're all networked together with an Ethernet, using least privilege and making sure each individual employee has like the smallest amount of privilege they need to be able to do their job. They should never have more access, more passwords, more information than they really need to know. Not that we don't trust them. In cybersecurity, humans and our interactions with the computer are the weakest link when it comes to protecting those environments. So I would definitely recommend that. Someone that has a lower level job shouldn't know every password and have access to certain accounts that they have no business being in. Even though it sounds harsh, it protects even from accidental incidents.
When you mentioned about HVAC, this one is very interesting because sometimes what happens is there's two different type of network, one for devices like HVAC, for example, manufacturing environment, and another network for operations like banking and HR, all those things. That will work, right?
Yep, always. Just people need the smallest amount of access to do
Yeah.
their jobs. It keeps everyone more safe.
Because I am from manufacturing environment, so these days now the computers are getting, the machines are getting interconnected. So they always work through IoT, internet, all those things. So the question is, the operations, for example, if you said HVAC, a disaster can happen. You just give a wrong signal to any machine.
Exactly.
And then, yes, so that way industrial Ethernet is very popular, so that it's a separate network, separated from the other general network. And also,
Piggyback off of what he's saying, as far as, since it is a Google account and it is a business account, you make your employees have a complex account, and then you can put 2FA on their Google account. It will help as far as the security of them saving their passwords under that.
Any other questions?
and also if I may add, there is a IEC 62443 cybersecurity. It has been formulated by International Society of Automation, and they are conducting the courses on cybersecurity practices.
Is cybersecurity affordable for small businesses? Like, a lot of companies have third-party vendors. So is it reasonable for small businesses, say, I don't know, 20 employees to afford services like that?
So I'm less familiar with small business because we're focused on financial services, so obviously it's a very niche market. There are various providers that play to every industry, knowing that there's always someone that can help, so, I don't know I'm hesitant to name anyone off the top of my head, but there are players out there that will help small businesses. I don't know if you have any recommend.
You're gonna find some more read reviews. So quick ransomware story. And ransomware, by the way, is very rare, to be honest. I've only worked on one. But what happened was every computer in the building, every Windows PC had admin privileges. If anybody knows the difference between a user account and an admin account, and anybody that works in a business that may have tried to install a program, for example, and it says admin name and password, that means you're not an admin account, right? That means you need a username and password to install things on a computer. Well, this place, they had an IT guy who was there for their security. He pulled up in his fancy Audi and got out, and we're like, you don't know what you're doing, do you? Like, he didn't even have that set up. So like, read your reviews, make sure you're getting somebody that actually knows what they're doing, and they're not just charging you a lot of money to not set up your business in the safest way.
What I'll say to that is,
Yeah.
just to your point, like, this is a great community in here. You all know people who are good in the industry and you're happy with, share those references with your ask. That's the best way too. I find word of mouth usually gets me a lot further when I'm talking in the same sphere, that I can go off that, at least gives me a hint, and you can do your diligence on top of that, but at least that sets you in the right direction of who to talk to and who not to talk to that point.
Yeah.
Did you have a
Do
question?
your research.
Yeah, so, we're a nonprofit, right, so we definitely don't have a lot of resources to spend on things, so I think that talking to different people is helpful to learn what people are doing. We do mail checks, we do online, but we do mail checks. Best bet is to go right to the post office. I hear what you're saying. Cause they're taking it
Yes.
right from the mailboxes that like what would be on a.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes to those blue postal bins. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're like harder to get into, but like criminals literally are putting something sticky down in there to grab whatever mail they can get. Yeah, I mean, and it happens, like the amount of times it's happened.
But it's not happening from the post office, like you can.
No,
Okay.
no, it's not from the post office, no.
Alright.
No.
You can buy the keys in the internet. Universal keys.
Go inside the post office.
Go in the
That's
post
that.
office.
And I'll add that there's also services that you can look into, for nonprofit or business accounts that allow you to push out that payment electronically in a very secure manner, so that you can replace a lot of the check writings, because then you have fewer checks that are just kind of circulating out in mailboxes and on who knows whose desk, with all that account information. So this is giving you more control over making that payment, directly into the account of who you're paying. Okay, I think we're at time, so thank you very, very much for being here. Certainly, if you wanna come up and ask any individual questions to the extent that our generous panelists have, time, but thank you all for being here, and please help yourself to, more food if you can. And thank you again, have a wonderful weekend. Take the food away.
So hungry, thank you.
I'll reach out to like,
Hi, she's great. It's so understandable. I feel like, hey, Mom, you know,